Don't have sex, because you will get chlamydia and die. I know what you're thinking. What a ridiculous thing to say, right? Well, believe it or not, adults and teachers have been saying ridiculous statements like this to scare our young adolescent minds into not wanting to have sex. For those of you who don't know, that quote was from the movie Mean Girls, where there was a coach teaching a sex ed class. He then continues to demand not to do certain sexual positions, and then finishes off by handing out a box of condoms. Now, instead of saying that horrific statement about how you will get chlamydia and die, I think he probably should have taken a more softer approach with teaching sex ed. Saying something like that, along with other ridiculous statements I'm sure most of us have heard growing up, I think is the main reason why young teens have big misconceptions about sex. Which is why today I want to convince you that why comprehensive sex education should be mandated in all public schools starting in the 8th grade. As we all know, our society has taught us and burned into our brains that talking to students about sex is considered a taboo subject. If anything, it's almost as if parents and educators don't want us learning about it because they think it will encourage our young minds into wanting to have sex. And as much as parents and teachers don't want their 14-year-olds having sex, that's just not the reality. So in today's discussion, I will be talking about why abstinence programs don't work, why we need comprehensive sex ed in public schools, and why teaching it in the 8th grade will be beneficial. So first, I would like to begin to prove to you why abstinence programs don't work. So according to letsgetchecked.com, this website talks about the rates of STDs and teen pregnancies. Alaska is the state with the highest rate of STIs, and right behind them is Louisiana, Mississippi, and New Mexico. And the states with the highest rate of pregnancies is New Mexico, Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Mississippi. And coincidentally, those states teach abstinence only. And can you guess what is the most reported STD in the US? If you were thinking chlamydia, you're right. Many educators want to teach abstinence only because they think it will delay the initiation of sexual intercourse between adolescents, which is associated with an increased risk of STIs and mistimed and unwanted pregnancies. This is coming from an article called Abstinence Only Until Marriage. This is true. Abstinence is 100% effective according to Planned Parenthood, but it's not the only option. Mentioning other methods to students will actually delay the initiation of sexual intercourse, reduce the number of partners, and increase condom use. This is coming from an article called Relationship Between Recall of Sex Education. And according to the House Committee on Government Reform, many abstinence programs actually provide false information to students. There's a lot of misrepresentations about the reproductive system, misrepresentations about the effectiveness of condom use. There's a lot of sexual and gender minority, false, moral judgments and religious concepts, and just factual errors in general. What's problematic about not providing enough information to students about practicing safe sex is that they will grow up to have misconceptions about sex and they won't know how to practice safe sex. For example, telling students that condoms are not effective is completely and utterly false. According to the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention, using condoms prevent HIV along with other STDs and STIs when used consistently and correctly. And providing false information stems from the religious aspects of the abstinence programs. They use scare tactics to make the students not want to have sex, so they say like condoms don't work, and then they don't provide other birth control methods, so what do the students do? You know, they're not going to listen to authorities, they're going to do it anyways, and what happens is they don't use protection, they don't know about other birth control methods because they weren't taught about other birth control methods, so what happens is they get unwanted STDs or STIs or unwanted pregnancies. So that's a major factor why those programs are not effective. On the contrary, comprehensive sex education is more effective. Of course, abstinence is used as a form of contraception, but there are other options and methods that can be taught. Some of those methods include the birth control pill, birth control patch, birth control shot, birth control implant, condoms, IUD, the withdrawal method, and abstinence. Those are all from Planned Parenthood. There's more methods, but those are the most common ones used. And using these methods will help lower unwanted STDs and STIs and unwanted pregnancies. And teaching students about these methods will help them gain knowledge about how to practice safe sex. The more you know, the more safe you'll be. And yeah, so sorry, really quick. I'm just gonna jump ahead because I lost my train of thought. So teaching them about those methods will help them gain knowledge about practicing safe sex. So that's why we need to start teaching it in the 8th grade. It sounds early, but that's when teens start experimenting, is as early as like 14. So sorry, I remember. So the topics that will be covered will be about the use of contraception, the topic of HIV and AIDS, the reproductive system, sexual orientation, gender identity, and consent. And these topics should be covered in their health class curriculum. And and of course, parents will be concerned about their children learning about this at such a young age. So the solution will be to have the health class send out opt-out forms, letting the parents know what topics will be covered in the class, and if they don't feel comfortable with it, they can opt their child out. And I know it goes against what I'm trying to accomplish here with having all the students be educated, but we have to take into consideration that not all parents will be comfortable with it because they are starting at a young age. But granted, our great state of California is one of the states that supports comprehensive sex education, but there can be many more that can do the same. And with all things considered, I think it's safe to say that teaching an abstinence-only curriculum isn't effective. And since the year is nearing to 2019, I think also our society should be in a time where positively talking about safe sex to students shouldn't be a taboo subject anymore. I mean, think of yourself when you were growing up in middle school or high school. Don't you wish you could have not have figured out things yourself when you could have been informed about it first? Thank you.
Well, you've got a nice dramatic attention device. It's based on the fictional story. I think you need to do a little bit more to convince us that even though it's fictional, it represents the way people actually teach this material in classrooms. I'm not sure that I'm convinced of that. I think you need to do a little bit more to tell us about the criticisms of the abstinence-only programs, when you get into that. I thought you did a very good job at organizing the speech at the beginning. There's a very good preview of what the structure is going to be. When you got to your first claim, I thought it was well signposted. After that, I didn't think the organization held together as well. I think you probably got lost a couple of times, and that might have been part of the reason that it seemed to fall apart. That first section, I think, has a lot of good information in it. And you're pretty consistent about citing your information, although sometimes it's a little generic. Like when you're talking about the research on abstinence-only programs, the one place that you are very efficient is giving us a list of the states that have high SDI rates or pregnancy rates, that sort of thing. And then there's a correlation with the abstinence-only programs. And that's about as far as it goes. After that, everything is largely asserted. You make it sound like they only hire ministers to teach abstinence-only programs in some of these states, and that they don't talk about particular subjects. That might be true, but I don't have any evidence that says that. It's mostly your assertion about those kinds of things. The notion that they don't talk about anatomy, or they don't talk about SDIs, or I do know that there is a limitation on the discussion of contraception. So I think that that's probably something that could be developed a lot more. I've heard this subject a lot, so I know that there's good information here for the position that you're taking. It just felt a little bit thin in this section here. The notion that comprehensive sex education is going to be more effective, I think that you need to sell that more. You do get a little bit sidetracked about some other issues, and part of that's an attempt to create some emotional resonance with what's going on at the end. I think you've got a nice kind of emotional rhetorical question about what you would like to have known when you were in that situation. I think that works pretty well. Like I said, presentation, the first part of the speech was really solid. When you got stuck, you kind of withdraw from this, and that's understandable. You can't remember what you're saying, so you slow down, you hesitate, you stop, you're looking in your internal mind to think about what the next thing is that you're going to say, and sometimes it doesn't come right into your brain at that particular moment. So instead of looking at us, you're kind of into your own thoughts for a moment. That happens. It wasn't terrible, but it just means that you probably needed a little bit more practice and rehearsal and that sort of thing. And the second part was less. It's almost like you can see there's a wall that you pass. You say, everything before the wall, I was doing good, and everything I got past the wall, it's like, well, where am I? And then when you remembered something, you kind of got back into it, but then it would kind of fade out again. So that's just something that you have to work on. All right, I'm going to stop there.